Let's just put together where we are with the Government of National Unity. You saw a moment ago the National Freedom Party saying there that it will join the IFP, the ANC and the Democratic Alliance in both the Government of National Unity and the Government of Provincial Unity, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal. That gets that over the line in KZN. Together they have 41 seats. MK and the EFF together have 39. Then we understand that the National Executive Committee of the ANC is meeting this evening, and that there will be the final decision taken on whether or not the Government of National Unity is in fact formed. We also understand that the Democratic Alliance is still locked in meetings and is still negotiating. In a way, if you look at the numbers, they're the big party that haven't yet said exactly what they are doing. The Freedom Front Plus, it appears that they will be voting in favour of an ANC member in the Northern Cape tomorrow, which suggests then that they might be joining the Government of National Unity as well. The Patriotic Alliance has said that it will probably join a Government of National Unity. There's several other parties where we are still awaiting clarity. But it does all suggest now, depending on what happens in the next 15 hours, that some kind of Government of National Unity or Grand Coalition, or whichever name you prefer, will start its formation tomorrow in the National Assembly. Meanwhile, the organisation Defend Our Democracy says that it represents a group of civil society organisations. It says it conditionally supports the idea of a Government of National Unity. Zaakirah Vida is Executive Director at Defend Our Democracy. Zaakirah, good afternoon to you. Okay, there are lots of moving pieces to all of this, but the general idea, when you say you support a Government of National Unity with conditions, what do you mean?
The conditions are twofold. One is that it must be underpinned by constitutionalism or constitutionality. And secondly, that it must be underpinned by good governance. And by good governance, there's a number of parts to this. One is really addressing the big issues facing the country, like that of load shedding, water crisis, addressing issues of access to education, healthcare, as well as adherence to the rule of law.
You obviously have some concerns. So the conditions are just those things. Do you think that the parties that we know of so far, so the ANC, the DA, the Patriotic Alliance, the National Freedom Party, the IFP, do you think they all adhere to that? And I realise, Zaakirah, that might be a tricky question to answer.
Well, a lot of it is wait and see. We have to see, first of all, what is the formation of the Government of National Unity tomorrow. And secondly, we then have to evaluate from a civil society perspective how are we going to hold this coalition government or grand coalition government to account. And that's something that civil society will have to explore in greater detail over the coming months.
We have so many problems in our society, and if we look at some of them, they're all, and particularly to, say, reduce inequality, which is a fundamental issue. What you need is a long-term, sustained, unified effort. People need to make concessions to make this work, and they'll need to make some of these concessions in public, literally in front of voters. And you know our politicians as well as the rest of us, Zaakirah. I mean, do you think that they will be able to do that?
The moment certainly calls for it. It's not going to be an easy task, but early indications from political parties have been quite positive in terms of the willingness to want to negotiate, the willingness to want to compromise. But again, it's something that is pretty new for the country at a national level. So we will have to see how this pans out over the next couple of months. There are some underpinning principles, I think, in the Constitution that we hope all parties will adhere to in this process.
So, I mean, there's a lot that needs to happen now. And do you think it might actually be a year or two before we know what we're dealing with? And that, yes, people will take the oath, they'll work together, they'll sit in cabinet meetings, but it'll take a while before we know what the outcomes really are.
Definitely. I think at the primary level, the immediate is really to get a president of the country, number one, voted in by the National Assembly. And secondly, the next big priority is to ensure that the budget is passed. Thereafter, I think it's going to have to be policy by policy working through what are the objectives. And ultimately, there's also talk of this national dialogue proposal being put forward. And we have to really begin to interpret or understand what are the terms of reference for this national dialogue that hopefully will spell out in greater detail what a government of national unity is able to achieve.
One of the problems with the Government of National Unity may be that if one of the politicians or one of the leaders or someone in the government kind of misbehaves, does something that's unconstitutional, it may be much harder to act against them than it is if there's just one party in government. Often the leader is the president. So do you think that could be a problem? That it might actually provide, for some people, some cover? Coalition arrangements might provide some cover for people to actually do the wrong thing.
Potentially, but there are also two positives. So the one is internal pressure, and a government of national unity with different parts or components to it may be able to bear pressure on other members to adhere to the rule of law. But secondly, there's also the continued role for members of parliament who remain in the opposition benches. So as much as you have participants in this government of national unity, as important is the role of those who are not part of it and wish to remain in the opposition benches. And then it's the role of those outside of the direct political sphere, those in civil society, those in the business or labor sector, who then bring external pressure in as well.
There are also many other things that are going to happen. There's another risk, perhaps, to a government of national unity, which is about the role of opposition and the role of oversight. Could that be weakened in a government of national unity?
It's something that we'll have to see as time goes on. One of the questions that are being raised in this period is what then happens to the opposition. So those who remain in opposition will have to define their role a bit more clearly, given that it's a changed scenario at the moment. But at the same time, I think that the opportunity for the moment is that all of the policies that go to Parliament will have to enjoy greater scrutiny than before. It won't be a given that policies are voted in just because a particular party holds a majority. I think there's, even internally within the government of national unity, there's going to have to be much more discussion, much more convincing on a per policy basis.
Zaakirah Vida, thank you, Executive Director at Defend Our Democracy. Do appreciate it.